Hello everybody, welcome to another detailed gun review. Today we're going to be looking at this absolutely miniature Pedersoli Liegi Derringer in 44 caliber, which is this tiny little thing right here. I thought I'd start off with a size comparison. Now I've got it next to my Taurus Model 66 Silhouette long barrel revolver, which is a 357 Magnum UK legal revolver, which is why it is so long. And what's kind of funny is comparing these two, of course, you can see how tiny this thing is. It's pretty much as long as the other one is tall. And what I find really amusing is how we just check that this one is unloaded, of course. This is a 357 Magnum, and this is a 44 caliber gun, so it's actually got a considerably larger bore, which I really like. Very small gun, very big hole in the end. So Pedersoli make a few different versions of this particular gun, and if we have a look in the cardboard box that the gun came in, it's a very small kind of airsofty plastic box. I always expect real guns to come in something a little more substantial than the airsoft guns that I'm more used to, but it's pretty much just an airsoft gun box in function, but it doesn't really need to be much more than that, I suppose. So they make a few different versions of this gun. Here's the manual that it comes with. It's actually a generic manual for all of their muzzle loading guns, or at least all of their small ones, so you can see. So they make this gun, which is the Liegi Derringer, which is their name that they've given to their 44 caliber small percussion pistol. You can also get it in 36 caliber, and it comes with a different profile barrel, which they call the cannon barrel. It's got sort of ribs in it. It kind of looks like a miniature cannon barrel, thus the name. And that's in 36 caliber, and they call that the pocket Derringer, which is kind of interesting because it's actually longer. It's actually longer than the 44 caliber gun, so I'd probably say that this is the pocket gun because it's smaller, but I'm not sure how they do their naming. I do know that they've called it the Liegi because so many of these guns, at least this style of gun that was so popular in the early 1800s, were made in Liège in Belgium. I assume Liegi is Liège in Italian. If we have a look here, just a gun book, not a very good one, I've got to say. Lots of nice pictures, but this guy really doesn't know what he's talking about. But anyway, here's an example of an almost identical gun. However, this one is a double barrel. You can see that there's two triggers and two hammers. But if we just grab this one a second, and of course it is unloaded, which you'll see when the barrel comes off. I mean, look at that. You can see where Pedersoli got their inspiration from. All of the curves, the lines, the shape, everything is near identical to this, which really just shows that that type of gun, this pattern of gun, despite being made in many different countries by many different manufacturers, are all very similar. Here's a British one, which is of course a different style, but it shows you the type of gun that was very popular for carrying in that kind of time period. Of course, what made these so desirable to people back then is that they're so small compared to previous generations of firearm technology, where people were reliant on flintlocks, which were bulkier and of course less reliable, but were bulkier and made for larger guns. With a percussion gun, all you need is your nipple for the cap. You've got a hammer. Of course, you've got your hole going through to the I guess chamber, not really chamber, but through to the barrel, and that's it. There's not much to these. Very, very simple guns. They could be made very cheaply, very small. And yeah, they were widespread, the kind of thing that sold in great numbers all over Europe. And here is Pedersoli's recreation of one. Now, one thing that was brought to my attention when I actually went to purchase this, the guy who I was buying it from, my local RFD, said, why don't you just get an original? And there are lots and lots and lots of examples of antiques just like this. They look very similar, just like the ones in the books. And of course, they've actually got some historic interest, being old guns, and they're quite cheap because again there were so many of this style of gun made. However, I really wanted something modern that I knew I could shoot safely. I quite like having reproductions of guns. If I wanted to have a genuine one, then I'd really just keep it as an antique, whereas I wanted one that I could actually have some fun with and shoot a whole lot. which is why I went for the Pedersoli. As I showed you a second ago, it came in a very basic cardboard box, and I thought that it would be nice, since I quite like this gun, I thought it'd be nice to put in something nicer, so I was looking for wooden boxes that might fit it. And I realised that Pedersoli actually do make a deluxe version of this gun. I believe it has a silver barrel and a silver frame that comes with a wooden case. So I messaged Pedersoli and I said, would I be able to buy one of those? And it was quite expensive, but they do sell the box separately. So I've got this nice little box, which is very, very compact. Again, if I get the revolver, my long barrel revolver out, you can see quite how tiny this box is. And what's really nice about this is when you buy the box, you also get included this really nice little powder flask, and it is absolutely tiny. I believe on its own you can get this from Henry Crank. They do sell it in the UK, and it's about 25 quid or something, so these aren't overly expensive, but it's nice that you're paying quite a bit for the box, but it does come with this, so there's some added value. Allowed me to kind of justify it to myself. So yeah, it comes with a nice little powder flask, really nice sort of oil looking finish, and it holds enough powder for this tiny gun to really last quite a long time. I've got 777 in here at the moment, so that fits in there nicely. What I've also got in here, which doesn't come with the gun, but you might be able to find one of these yourself, a really useful little pistol capping tool. So you can get larger ones of these quite easily for rifles, but this is a really small one. Just allows you to put that percussion cap on, because it's a little bit fiddly trying to get your hand under your thumb under the hammer there. You don't want to be bringing this to full cock, you want to keep it in half cock while you're doing that. So it's nice to be able to just get this little thing in there and strip your cap off. So that fits in there as well. So I've got 10 percussion caps, I've got my powder flask, I've got the barrel wrench, which does come with the gun, and I've also got, I've got to put it down, also got a little plastic tube here, which I think a drill bit came in with my 44 caliber balls. They're actually 451, so 45 caliber balls, and you can fit 10 of those in there, and very nicely it actually fits in the box. So in this very compact little wooden box, you've got all the equipment for 10 shots, and I suppose you could put some more balls and percussion caps in there, so you could potentially get more than that. But yeah, I really like that you can have everything all in one little box, because one thing that was a little bit daunting to me when I first got into muzzle loading black powder guns is just the amount of equipment that you need. You know, if you want a muzzle loading revolver, if it doesn't have a built-in ramrod, then you need a little stand, and you need your jar of powder, you need all your balls, you need your percussion caps, you might need some lube, some wax, you might need wadding, and there's a lot of paraphernalia. It's really nice that everything you need you can fit into this box. Alright, so let's have a closer look at the gun itself, because even though it is very tiny and wasn't overly expensive, these are less than £200, about £190 I believe this one was. They're really nicely made, and they're just really nice little guns to fiddle with. So you've got a very, very simple mechanism with a folding trigger. You have a very, very thin top, I guess you kind of call it the wrist. The top of the grip there is very thin. I have heard people call these flimsy and say that it feels like it might break. I kind of know what they mean. I've actually taken the wood off because I wanted to see what it was like off the gun, and it is indeed very, very thin, with the metal out of there even thinner. It's not something that really concerned me when I was shooting it, but you don't want to drop this. I have a feeling if you were to drop it like this and it slammed down on the butt, it could break off. You've got the screws anchoring it there, but I wonder if this portion could snap. But it feels nice, and it's nice quality wood. Looks good. Nicely finished little gun. Brings you back to the size of it, though. I mean, this thing is tiny, very small gun, and I don't even have big hands, but you can see the size of this, which I think makes it all the more amusing that it's 44 caliber. While talking about the barrel, let's get it off, and you can see that this is definitely unloaded because I've been handling it all this time. So here's the barrel key that it comes with. You can use this to both remove the nipple and to help remove the barrel. You don't actually need it. I've shot this a few times without. I've actually left this at home by accident, and you don't actually need it. You can tighten it down pretty well just with your hand, but it does help. Just engages in there like that. We can take off our barrel and see that there's nothing in there and there's no powder in there. So, being a screw barrel design like this, there are a few advantages compared to a traditional muzzle loading gun. The first of which is that, as I've just demonstrated here, let's say that I had loaded this gun and then I decided that I didn't want to shoot it. You're in a bit of a tricky, sticky situation with a regular muzzle loader. So once you've rammed your ball down quite forcefully, it's engaged in the rifling, the powder is behind it, you're going to have to shoot it really, unless you can put something down the bore that screws into the barrel and manages to extract, screws into the ball and somehow manages to extract it safely. Not really something you want to be doing. So once you've loaded a regular muzzle loader, you really should shoot it. Whereas really something like this would be keeping it in a safe direction, of course. Removing the percussion cap would be the first thing you do as well. You could quite easily screw the barrel off. Your ball would just be probably stuck in there. Pop it out, and your powder you could pour out. So this is actually, from a safety point of view, I think these have a little bit of merit there. The other advantage is that because the ball loads directly here, there's no ramming involved. There are no wads required. Patches, I suppose I should say, instead of wads. It's simply a case of screwing the barrel off, pouring your powder in and placing a ball and screwing the barrel back over it. No having to worry about the size of the ball, being able to actually ram it down easily. No patches required. For a first muzzle loader or black powder gun, in that regard, this is a good choice. Although the lack of sights means that it's a very challenging gun to shoot accurately. All right, I'm going to take the barrel off again for a second and show you something rather interesting, which there's a little bit of misinformation out there about. So here's our barrel. Let's have a look at the markings. By the way, this is all very nicely made. This is a nicely machined barrel. The threads are a little bit rough. I do a lot of thread work, grinding threads, and I'm kind of used to very cleanly machined threads, and yeah, the threads are a little bit rough, if I'm honest, but in general the machining's good for a relatively cheap gun. And you've got your markings here, black powder only, and a little proof mark and your Pedersoli mark on there. All right, anyway, what I was talking about with information about these being a little bit wrong. If we have a look down the barrel here, and I put something there that's a white, we've got some grooves. Now, some people have looked at this and said, it's a rifled gun, it's got grooves in the barrel. In fact, if I get a good view of the muzzle here, you can kind of, probably can't really see, but you can see the grooves, and it does indeed look like rifling. However, it's completely straight. As you can see there, it's very, very shallow, and it's completely straight. So there's obviously no rifling effect being imparted on the projectile here. If it's completely straight, how can there be? And indeed, I believe the only reason that the barrel does have these grooves in is to, one, allow you to put the tool in, because this engages in those very shallow grooves, and that's what allows you to twist the barrel on and off with a little bit of force. And the other reason is when you have the ball on the other end, so you have the ball sat on here, the ball needs to engage into something that will hold it in place, but not obviously provide so much resistance that it blows the barrel off. So having those shallow grooves means that the ball will stay in place, and you tighten it down into the rifling, but then it's easy enough to shoot the ball through it. So yeah, some people have called this a rifled gun. It looks like rifling, but being completely straight, I don't think rifling is accurate, and I'm sure there is no spin being imparted on the projectile here. As for projectiles, I've been using the Spear 451 caliber swage lead balls, which are quite nice and uniform. Some of the just purely cast ones I've seen have been quite rough, and they have that little pip bit where it's been cast. But these are perfectly round, and these are 451 caliber, and they're a little bit too loose. You can see there it will just about drop into the barrel, and I could probably push that through quite easily. Whether that's just my example, I'm not sure, but I really need to get some 454 or perhaps 457 or something larger. Even though Pedersoli recommend 451, there really isn't quite enough compression here to make a really good seal on top of the black powder. And I can tell when I'm screwing it on that the ball is going into the rifling quite easily, and I think a slightly larger ball would be better. As for percussion caps, I've been using these, what are they, RWS? Yeah, RWS. So they're not number 10, they're not number 11, they're 1075. Maybe it's like an in-between size, I'm not sure. But the guy I bought the gun off, I just tried a few different caps that he had in stock, and these were the ones that fit the best. And I bought a few hundred of them, and I've still got lots of them left, because this isn't a gun that you kind of go to the range and blast 100 rounds through, really, is it? So they go on easily enough. Of course, you've got a shroud around the hammer. And what I mean by that is that the nipple is quite well covered when the cap goes off, meaning you're not getting bits of it blasted in your face. Now, as you've just seen there, the trigger is folding. It does not present itself on half cock. So what you'd do, let's go over the loading procedure quickly. So what you'd do is you'd break it down like this. And I'll say you should really be keeping this in a safe direction the whole time, just because, you know, safety. When I'm at the range, I unscrew the barrel with it pointing down range. With such a miniature gun like this, it is so easy to point it somewhere that you don't want to. You've got to be really careful that you're keeping it pointed in a safe direction, even when you're loading and unloading it. So the procedure would be to unscrew the barrel, fill up with black powder, or in my case I'm using 777, which might be a little bit powerful for it, but I haven't seen any ill effects yet. So you fill to the top, and then a little bit more, I've found. So rather than just filling to that exact sort of line and then placing the ball on top, as I demonstrate, what I actually do is fill a little bit beyond, so it almost makes a little ant mound, and then you bury the ball into it, and that gives it a tiny little bit of compression. Now with 777, you're not meant to give heavy compression, and I'm not talking about packing it down in the hole there. I'm just talking about a little bit of giving it a little bit of resistance when you're trying to screw this on. And again, like I was saying before, I think a slightly bigger ball would be better for this, actually, for a little bit of a better seal. Anyway, you simply fill this cavity up. There's no measuring. You don't need to get a scale out or have pre-measured charges. You simply fill up to the top, so there's so your ball sits into it. You screw your barrel back on. Again, I'd be keeping this pointed down range. If you need to have the help of the little wrench, you can do that to screw it up. So screw it up, and then you'd be putting on your percussion cap, either trying awkwardly to get it in there with your hand, or if you're sensible, you'll have a little capping tool like this one. You'll put it on half cock to expose the nipple. Put that on there like that. And then, of course, as soon as you bring it to full cock, you're ready to shoot, which is a little bit daunting the first time shooting something without a trigger guard that just has a little folding trigger. And a gun that's so tiny with no sights. I was quite nervous about shooting this the first time, if I'm honest. And I will put some footage somewhere in this or at the end showing me shooting it, just to show you. So this is the point where you'll be keeping it downrange, of course, because as soon as that percussion cap is on there, the gun is ready to go. You carefully cock the hammer, which brings out the trigger, and something's just fallen out of the gun. Well, that's interesting. Isn't it great when this happens as you're filming a review? Looks like the pin that holds the trigger in has sheared in two. Well, I'm going to have to message Pedersoli or Henry Crank about that. Let's just put it back in for now. It looks like the pin has actually sheared off. How interesting. Well, I'll push it back in there for now. Better get that sorted out. Anyway, great endorsement for the gun there. Yeah, it's gone back in now. Interesting. Anyway, at this point, you would be pulling it to full cock. Let's do it this way around so the pin doesn't fall out. Full cock, trigger comes down, which is actually the only thing that makes a click when you do that. Something that I don't like about this is that the hammer is incredibly stiff, which I think it just has to be for reliable ignition. Like, it is almost painful on your thumb, and it doesn't really have a solid noise as it goes to full cock. Oh, it's difficult. Difficult to do on camera. There you go. I'll demonstrate that by... Actually, how can I demonstrate that? There you go. See if you can hear the hammer engaging in the sear. Barely audible. I don't like that. There have been times at the range where I've cocked this and I just haven't been entirely sure that the hammer is cocked properly, and I've kind of had to grab it with two hands and really make sure, because the last thing I want is to let go of this and it's a slam forward. Again, I was a little bit nervous the first time I shot this, and it's still a little bit daunting, which I know sounds silly, but being a member at a club where you shoot at an indoor range, you really have to, be very aware of where you're pointing a gun like this, and of course where the bullet's actually going. And this thing has no sights. Oh, sorry, I get my foot out of the shot. This thing has no sights at all. Let's have a look what it looks like looking down the gun. This is what you are presented with. And you just have to try, and the best way to do it, I find, is to actually keep both eyes open, look at the barrel like that, point it down, and just hope that it is somewhere near when you pull the trigger. I wasn't actually sure if they would allow me to shoot a gun like this at the indoor range. Again, there's just a chance that you're not going to be pointing it in exactly the right place. After a few shots, I figured out the best way to hold it, and I was able to keep my shots fairly well regulated on target. I certainly wasn't putting them into the ceiling or hitting them, shooting them down into the floor. But this certainly isn't a gun that you shoot for accuracy. It's just a bit of fun. So after you've fired the shot, you can fold your trigger back in there. So I suppose I should come up with some kind of conclusion, and it's a tricky one to come to a meaningful conclusion about. It's the kind of gun that if you want it, then get it. It's fun. It's definitely fun to shoot when you manage to get it right. First couple of times I didn't put quite enough powder in. There was obviously a very slight air gap, or maybe the compression just wasn't quite there, and the first few shots I was met with a kind of a little pop, and the ball practically rolled out the end, and I realized then that you actually need to almost overfill it with powder right up to the top, a little bit extra, push the ball into it, tighten the barrel down properly, and then you can actually get some fairly powerful shots out of this. I haven't run it across a chronograph, of course. I definitely wouldn't want to put this anywhere near a chronograph, because I would definitely shoot the chronograph to bits. But looking at someone else shoot this when I've let other people have a go, I don't want to say you can actually see the ball flying in the air, but I think if you were to record it with a decent camera, it'd be very easy to see the ball flying, because you can tell the velocity here is very low, perhaps 300, 400 feet per second. I would not be surprised if it's that low. We are, after all, talking about quite a large and heavy projectile backed by a very low powder charge. I think it works out about 10 grains or so of powder that you fit in there. And these are quite heavy. They're about 140 grains, I believe. So it's a bit of an odd combination. A gun this tiny with a ball that big and heavy, very little black powder. Yeah, it's interesting shooting a gun like this. Then the audible delay between the bang and then it hitting the back of the range, and sometimes coming back. The lead wasn't even flattening fully at the end of the 25. I suppose it'd be about 30 meters. It's 25. It's a 25-meter range, and it was quite clear that the lead was not being completely flattened and destroyed at the end of the range, because some of them did roll back and end up by my feet. So this thing doesn't have a whole lot of power. I'd love to actually know quite what the ballistics are. but it's not the kind of thing you buy for power or for accuracy. It's the kind of thing that you think is cool, and you appreciate that it's going to be a bit of a challenge to shoot. But at least sort of build quality wise, it's a really nicely made little gun. It's a gun that I like to get out and show people. You've got color case hardening on the frame, nice little folding trigger. It's a really It's a really pleasant little gun that I probably won't shoot a whole lot, to be perfectly honest. It's just that kind of gun that's I'm gonna shoot every now and then, but it's mostly going to be a showpiece and something to talk about with people. Anyway, I'm going to put a bit of shooting footage in. Please ask me any questions. I'm sure there's lots that I've missed. But that is my review of the Pedersoli Liegi Derringer. More videos on the way.
Say when you start filming.
Yeah, we can go.